Welcome to the EntreEd Talk podcast, the show by educators, for educators, parents, and the community. We're so excited to bring this to you. I'm Toi.
And I'm Laura, and we're excited to uplift best practices in entrepreneurship education.
And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to the EntreEd Talk podcast on whatever platform you listen. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the EntreEd Talk podcast. We are over the moon excited to have Dave Arnold with us today. Dave is a board member and minority owner of Adventures on the Gorge, which he founded and operated for 40 years with his partners. He has always had a passion for the outdoors, spending much of his time on his family farm in Appalachian, Ohio. He feels like he always grew up with one foot in Appalachia. Dave grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, believing there was no difference between work, play, and family. It was his grandfather who fueled his passion for the outdoors while teaching him important lessons about business. Dave followed his passion for the outdoors to West Virginia, where he began a job as a river guide on the New and Gauley Rivers in 1976. Prior to that, he taught kayaking for 2 years at a boys' summer camp in North Carolina. He says, that first job taught me to work hard and play hard, to always be passionate about what you do, treat people with respect, celebrate diversity, and embrace change. It also taught him about the delicate balance of entertaining rafters while keeping them safe, and it planted in him a deep-rooted love for the Mountain State. In 1978, Arnold combined his entrepreneurial heritage with his love for whitewater rafting by joining forces with Kevin Whelan and Doug and Jeff Proctor and founding Class 6 River Runners. Today, that endeavor has evolved into Adventures on the Gorge, which is quickly becoming a world-class adventure resort. And if you've not been there, you need to go. It's been a wild ride for Dave, but of course, work is never really work when you love what you do. So true. As his business has grown, so has his role in shaping the state's tourism industry. Dave has been a voice for West Virginia tourism for the past 25 years, a responsibility he takes very seriously and is eager to share with others. In addition to being an outspoken advocate for West Virginia tourism, Dave's love for the Mountain State has been shown through multiple ways he has given back. He has served on the West Virginia Tourism Commission for more than 20 years, championing the growth and success of the industry. For more than 10 years, he has dedicated his time as chairman of the West Virginia Hospitality and Travel Association, served on the West Virginia Economic Development Authority, and was part of the team that successfully bid to bring the Summit Bechtel Reserve to Fayetteville for the Boy Scouts of America. I have been there. It is awesome. He also serves on the board of the New River Gorge Economic Development Authority and as an ex officio member for the West Virginia Hospitality and Travel Association's board. Dave finds his motivation in beautiful rivers and the people who love them. His greatest professional achievement has been helping build an adventure resort for guests to enjoy while providing a great place to work. For the reason he worked so hard to promote and grow tourism in the Mountain State, his answer is simple: because West Virginia has given me so much. Welcome, 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 Infinity Dave. We're so excited to have you here today.
Well, Toi and Laura, great to be here.
I just want to say, because our listeners cannot see you, but Dave lives his values. He's sitting on this gorgeous deck overlooking near Hawks Nest, West Virginia. If you haven't been, again, New River Gorge and Hawks Nest are the best in the world. So Dave, thank you for giving us that gorgeous scenery in the background.
Well, this is home.
Absolutely amazing. This is a lot to unpack, and I know we're not going to unpack all of it, because we like to do that because then we get to have you back another time.
Great. I'd be honored.
So before we dive in, we always like to ask our guests to just give us the 30,000 mile high overview of your trajectory and sort of how you started and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that's probably pretty important is I come from an entrepreneurial family. I had mentioned to you, Toi, when we were talking earlier, 50 of my closest relatives, I would say 48 of them are entrepreneurs right now. And I've always questioned whether that's genetics or whether it's behavioral. I suspect it's a little of both. But my whole life, I was involved with, late night phone calls when, a truck was broke down. My grandfather was in the trucking business, and, he would leave at 3 a.m. and go get in a semi and drive to wherever, Cleveland, and wake up in the morning and say, where'd Gramps go? And she go, oh, they had a truck breakdown. He had to go do, so that along with risk, I my whole life has all been about risk. Matter of fact, that trucking company actually went bankrupt. It was at one point one of the top 100 trucking companies in America. So anyway, my whole family has always been about entrepreneurism. I've never really worked for the man. I mean, I've kind of done it. If I have any message to teachers or kids about entrepreneurism, is it's really simple. You don't have to work for the man, whatever you perceive that to be. If you have a great idea, I don't care how poor you are, I don't care where you come from, there are ways to make that work. Then the next thing probably is a little bit of my background. I did get a college education, which I think is awesomely important. Of all things, I was going to be a doctor. I was in pre-med at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. My wife and I both were pre-med. We met at Miami, and our intention was to both become doctors. You'd mentioned in the prelude, I had taught kayaking in North Carolina, and when I graduated, I was sort of like in the dilemma of, do I do another 5 years of education, or do I follow my true passion, my true dream, which I think is another message that's really important. And my true passion was always the outdoors, whether it was kayaking or canoeing or running rivers or hunting or fishing or whatever it might be. That was my passion. So myself and some of my business partners that are still partners today, we looked at maybe we ought to try it for a year or two to be entrepreneurs. So we started Class 6. Each of us had to get together $7,500. And that was the entry fee. And one of my partners' father mortgaged his home to get that. My father gave me a low interest loan with a 6-month forgivable. After those loans were paid, we never had a problem from a bank for the next 40 years. So the progress of the company is pretty simple, I guess. It's a story of continuous growth, but not huge growth, which I think is also important. You know, we always grew 5%, 13%, 14%. One year we grew 37%. That was because of a movie that came out called River Wild. America's tourism behavior is driven by Hollywood, and that's a perfect example of that. And eventually, after doing this for 35 years, we sold our company to employees and guests. We didn't want to sell to somebody from wherever, Chicago, New York, wherever. We said we would sell if it was to people that understood our vision and understood what our commitments were. So we did retain some stock, and my partners and I stayed on for 10 years to help them transition. And I am now, as of last year, retired, but I still sit in the board. And in these days and age, I'm very active as a board member because there's a lot going on. So there's a quick summary.
So you've started multiple things. One of my favorite places in the world is a place called Adventures on the Gorge, which you're a founding member. And if folks who haven't been there, you really got to. It's a pocket in what seems like the middle of nowhere. And once you get there, you're at the top of the world. So Dave, would you tell us a little bit about that entrepreneur experience and how you waded into it? And
Sure. So Class 6 was the genesis of Adventures on the Gorge. And Class 6 was always pretty much a whitewater rafting company. We were blessed to have two of the best rivers in the world, the New and the Gauley. We started as a rafting company. At one point, probably 80% of our revenue came from rafting. Today, we probably only produce about 40% of our revenue from rafting. It's still the big horse that pulls the wagon, but we realized that we had to do something more. Rafting was not growing, but the resort business was. So we started cabins first. We built some cabins, and then food and beverage expanded, and then zip lines, canopy tours, multiple bike riding opportunities, teaching kayaking. I mean, we became a very diverse product. The big horse is still there, but she's getting old, and there's a whole bunch of ponies pulling that wagon now. The ponies are, zip lining, canopy tours, food and beverage, lodging. I mean, we have 149 cabins. We don't have a hotel. We never wanted a hotel. We have a swimming pool, and, we can entertain you from the minute you get there to the minute you go home.
So you talked before about, you cobbled together this amount of money and in one fashion or another, all of your partners, and then you started this thing. So, and you talked also about risk. Can you share a little bit about what you went through to get things up and running, like your personal experience and what you had to risk and sacrifice to do that?
Young entrepreneurs never surprise me because, they're willing to do amazing, risky things. It's the people in their 50s and 60s that blow my mind. We were young. We were in our 20s. I think I told you, Toi, when we started, I was looking at some Social Security income data, and we paid ourselves less than $3,000 our first year. Well, even though that was 40 years ago, how do you get by on $3,000? Well, it's pretty simple. You live, eat, and breathe the business. You eat leftovers from the river trips. My wife and I, our first year, lived in a tent. We literally for 6 months lived in a tent. The tent sits where the pool is, if you've ever been with us. If you go in the pool, that's where Peggy and I lived the first year. So I have a lot of people ask me, they go, well, wow, that was hard. And I say, no, it wasn't. We were just as happy. We were just as excited. We didn't need anything. We just embraced ourselves in the business, and that's what made it successful. This is another thing that's pretty amazing. We never had a down year financially ever. We've always made a net profit. And I think that when you talk about risk and sacrifice, if you're really, really committed, the risk just becomes part of the game. The other thing is, I'm in a risk business. I mean, we run some of the hardest rivers in the world. I mean, they are, when you sign a release form on the Gauley and you're running the upper Gauley, you better pay attention to the guide very, very closely, and you better pay attention to everything because, if you think about it, there's not many sports where you can just jump in. I mean, you just can't jump in an NFL football game if you're a pretty good cornerback. You can't do it. You can't just jump in a NASCAR race. You can drive the car. Yeah, I'm in pretty good shape. Okay. And you can't do that. We allow you to do that. We allow you to jump in to some of the world's toughest rivers without much prior experience. We do ask that you're in good shape, and we do ask that you can swim and with some things, but even those aren't requirements. I had a woman one time who couldn't swim, who was one of the best guests I ever had. She was fearless, absolutely fearless. I challenged her one time and I said, are you okay? And she said, hey, look, I jump out of airplanes and I don't fly. She said, I can run this river. That's no problem. I thought about her comment for a minute. I said, well, you are welcome, girl. Risk means a lot of things to different people. It's every day 8 people get in my raft and they turn around and look at me and I say, hi, I'm your guide. I'm Dave. Well, there's a huge amount of risk in that moment. The key is confidence. And it goes back the same thing to business. If you're confident, if you're sure that what you're doing is going to work and you really believe in it, if you're sure your guiding abilities are there and you believe in it, then risk becomes minimalized.
Wow. Yeah, I've had the fear of God put into me in a raft before.
Yeah. I rafted for guides, and I will tell you, I love water. I was not fearful at all. Your guides are unbelievable. There's fun and crazy as all get out, but they let you know this is serious, and if it comes to serious, we're going to be with you. And it was phenomenal. I mean, I can't say enough about how great it was and your guides and experience.
Hi all, we are super excited to offer an exclusive discount for our listeners to attend this year's EntreEd Forum taking place on November 18th and 19th in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and experiential learning opportunities to help you ignite entrepreneurial thinking and integrate entrepreneurship into your learning communities. Use promo code EntreEd Talk to receive 5% off of every individual registration. Again, that's promo code EntreEd Talk. To learn more about the forum and register, visit www.entre-ed.org today and subscribe for updates as we launch new things happening every week as part of the planning for the forum. Thanks. See you there.
You've done so many things, Dave. The other, Toi and I both had the fabulous experience of being at the Summit Bechtel Boy Scout Reserve. Toi, I believe, visited the International Boy Scouts, and my son did the first ever Jamboree in West Virginia in 2014. Tell us about that adventure and how you waded into helping that come to West Virginia. That was huge.
Well, this is a great story. Not sure how much of an entrepreneur story it is, but maybe. Here's how that came about. So at that time, our governor was Governor Joe Manchin, and across his desk, along with 50 other governors in the United States, came a request for proposal for something that was very vague. We didn't know what it was. And that's not unusual in the world of economic development. So a request came and they had certain requirements. They needed a large tract of land, at least 10,000 acres. They needed access to an airport. They needed access to highway, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of standard stuff. So Governor Manchin formed a task force, which I was lucky enough to be appointed to that. And our job was to work with the company. The company was called McCallum and Sweeney. McCallum and Sweeney would be the kind of company you would hire if you were going to build like if Boeing was going to build a new place that manufactured aircraft. They might hire McCallum and Sweeney, or, Apple wanted to start a new corporate office. Again, we didn't know what it was. We just knew parameters of what they wanted. And we worked with McCallum and Sweeney, and eventually, to make a long story short, they revealed who they were, who their client was, which was the Boy Scouts of America. Now, the Boy Scouts of America have done jamborees for many, many years, but they were all tied to graciousness, someone allowing them to just say, you can use our facility. The last one before the summit was formed was at Fort A.P. Hill. So the military graciously said, well, you can use this part of the facility we're not using. Well, guess what happened? Certain things happened in the world that they needed to use that for training. So all of a sudden the Boy Scouts were dealt with a smaller piece of property. And at that point they decided, let's just get our own piece of property and let's let philanthropy drive it. Again, to speed this story up, it came down to 15 players. We were in the top 15. We were like, cool. And then it came down to 5 players and we were in the game and we were all like, wow, we might be able to do this. And then it came down to 3. And lo and behold, West Virginia gets it. And we were picked. Originally, it was Virginia and us were going to share it, but that's a long story. And eventually, we got it all. So that's how West Virginia became the site. It involved some really strong work through the governor's office, really strong work through the task force that I was on. And we basically talked them into saying, this is where you want to be. And they bought it and they're here and they're happy.
It's a beautiful place. Like I went and did a training for some of the volunteers there this past summer, and it was really hard for them to get me out of there. Not just logistically, that part was hard too, but it was really, I was like, well, what's that? What's going on over there?
I'm telling you, of all the things that have just blown my mind, when you go through the security gate and you come up that hill and you look over, especially if there's a jamboree in place, and you see 40,000 kids camping there, living, it's mind blower. I mean, other than a giant concert, like Woodstock or something, I can't think of anything that's like it. It's just this, and it's totally off the grid. When they turn it on in full force, it becomes the second largest city in West Virginia. So what I mean by that is they have their own power, their own water, their own sewage. They are self-sustained. They have an amazing cell structure for cell phones through AT&T. It's just a mind blower property.
Yeah, I'm trying to weasel my way back into a role.
We're always looking for volunteers.
Where's my evil plan?
Yeah.
I really just want to play on all the stuff. I need to be like a tester. Can I go?
Yeah. This year was really amazing with the Boy Scouts because this was the World Jamboree. So there were people from all over the world there walking around, listening to all the languages being spoken. There was just some amazing cultural differences. It was very, very special. Probably my most special moment at the final event, there's 40-some thousand kids there, all sitting in an arena, outdoor arena, and they had 2 United Nations generals talk, and one of them, Mr. Moon, he said to the kids, he said, I don't know why my generation will not fix global warming. It's very real, but we're not going to do it, and I can't explain it, but your generation is going to have to fix this. And the reason you're going to have to fix this is there is no plan B. We only have one Earth, and you're going to have to fix this. And it was really powerful to me. 40,000 kids, I think, got that message loud and clear.
Well, there's always Mars, right? If we don't.
That's plan Z.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's so beautiful. I want to circle back on something because I found this in I guess my travels and in my conversations and all of the things. When you are passionate about something and you truly love something, and then you start to build a business around it, and you start to hire folks, and like what Laura was saying, your guides are so incredible. And I think that when people that work for you or with you, when they know, like when they feel that passion and that energy, and I think that brings, it's like A players attract A players. I think that brings those people together. And I wonder if you could just speak to your leadership style and, how you deal with your employees. And I mean, it sounds horrible because right now with the COVID-19 that they're at home, I guess, instead of doing amazing things, and it's so beautiful now. But could you speak a little bit to your leadership style and how
Sure.
you run your business?
First off, COVID-19 is just heartbreaking for everybody, including us. We're closed. And it's just, to me, it's not heartbreaking that I'm not seeing somebody on a zip line or a bus. We hire about 500 employees. So it's heartbreaking that 500 employees who have been waiting all winter to start work again are now in queue. And that's heartbreaking. But leadership style, I think if you asked most employees about me, they would tell you one of my leadership styles is transparency. I am a full believer that in the absence of good information, rumors fill the void. So no matter, other than extreme sensitivity, you might as well tell people the truth. And if you do that enough, they eventually learn to believe you and they trust you. And trust is also one of the major cornerstones of at least my belief in leadership. And probably the third thing is that you got to be real. Probably one of the most important things in leadership is kindness and genuineness and empathy and having a heart. This is a good example of COVID right now. Our company has not laid anyone off. Lots of people have, including in the rafting business around the world, including here in West Virginia. We may come to that, don't get me wrong, but we're fighting like a bad dog to not lay anyone off. So those kind of things speak a lot about character. And if you do those kind of things for 40 years, then people tend to respect you and believe in you. I've actually been told by a number of people over the years, you were too nice. You should have fired some people earlier. There's probably some truth to that, but I'm not sure you can be too nice. And I'll also tell you this, some of the best employees that we've ever had, I actually fired at one point. Sometimes somebody leaves and they get a little dose of reality and they come back and then they're like 10 times as good of an employee as anybody else. I'll go back to the transparency thing. Just to give you an example, for all the years we were in business, my partners and I stood in front of everybody on 2 different occasions. I'm talking a couple hundred people. And we just sat up front and said, for the next 45 minutes, you can ask us any question you want. Well, never, ever did we ever not answer a question. I always reserve the right to say, if it's 2 out there, we may not answer. If somebody asked something that was mean to someone else or some really super confidential thing. But, in all those years, no one ever asked a question that we couldn't answer. And I think from a leadership standpoint, you do that enough and people follow. And we are blessed to have, we've probably had 5,000 employees. And other than a couple examples, which I will not go into details on, I mean, just unbelievable people. And part of that is also our business. Our business is about fun and it's about, really exciting things and running some of the best rivers in the world. And I don't know how you could not get excited about what we do as an employee. I can't tell you how many employees came. This is a really powerful line. And I've actually had guests tell me this too. It's a very simple line. I've had a number of people come up to me and very, very from the heart said, you changed my life. It doesn't get any better than that.
Absolutely.
I'm coming back to rafts soon. So Dave, a lot of our audience are educators. What would you say to educators to help inspire the students that are with them for periods of time to help them find their passions? You've clearly led a life of passion. What do you say to them?
Well, first off, my wife is a retired school teacher. She taught here in West Virginia. She taught middle school. She taught English. She taught science. 8th grade, probably one of the hardest grades. A lot of people would tell you, the transition of hormones. And she loved that. She loved that age. The wilder, the better. But so my whole life has also had a lot of educators in it. I mean, I'm constantly going to a party and, it's all educators and me. So I have a pretty good feel for that. I think probably the most important thing you can tell people is this. Pretty much anything you really want to do, you can do. If you believe in it and you really, really focus on it, I don't care what it is. If you declare that you're going to be an astronaut at age 12 and you focus on it, I think there's a really good chance you're going to become an astronaut by age 30, 28. I think from an entrepreneur standpoint, it's really easy for me to say because I told you my whole life was been immersed in entrepreneurism, not in an educational way, just in a life way, in a cultural way. But I believe there are a million great ideas that if you really believe in it, you will accomplish it. Now, that might mean that some of your ideas are really silly and you're going to have to mentor with people and you're going to have to reach out to people that have done this before and pay attention and listen. It doesn't mean that you're stubborn and you say, I'm going to do this without input. But mentoring is probably the second thing. Believing in it is the first, and having good mentors is the second. And by the way, they don't have to be formal mentors. They don't even have to be live mentors. It's funny, I was talking to somebody the other day and I said P.T. Barnum from Barnum and Bailey's Circus is one of my best mentors. The guy was amazing. And I did a lot of PR, and there's not many PR people that are better than P.T. Barnum. So, especially in this day and age with things like Zoom that we're using right now, or, Google or anything. I mean, your mentor can be Winston Churchill if you want, even though he's 6 foot under. Pick your dream, focus on it, get great mentors. The other day I was talking to somebody about mentorship, and this woman is very, very gregarious, and her name's Heidi. And I said, Heidi, for God's sakes, you're made for this. She's starting to do lobbying in Washington, D.C. And I said, she was a river guide for years. I said, you're a river guide. You can lobby and you can talk anybody. Get your butt in there and find some people that have been doing this for years that are professional lobbyists and make them your friends and learn from them. And I guarantee if you stick to it in a couple of years, you'll be one of the best lobbyists in DC. I think it's that simple.
You're right. I think it sometimes just takes one voice outside of your own head encouraging you. And I've seen it within my own kids and certainly within myself. My graduate school training came from one voice saying, you're really good at this, go for it. It's not hard to inspire people. We don't do it enough, I think. So I love that you inspire people. And I love that you use even people who are 6 feet under. I've never really thought about mentoring in that way, that it doesn't have to be current.
Absolutely. And, from a teacher's standpoint, their role is hugely important because, they may be that person who tells that kid who was, I know you work with kids from preschool up, but I mean, it could be any age, but they may be the one that it puts that thought in their mind. One thing I've learned from talking to my wife and all her teacher friends is that the odds are not good, meaning maybe you have 1,000 kids and a couple of them will become rock stars. I don't mean literally rock stars, but, will become great entrepreneurs if that's what you're focused on. The odds, you can't have expectations that are too high. I wish it was different, but reality is that, you have 1,000 kids and there's only a couple of them that you're going to talk into becoming successful entrepreneurs. And there's nothing wrong with that because like I said, we've employed 5,000 people. Well, if you talk 5 of your kids out of 1,000, that could be 20,000 employees someday. It's not a small number. 5 is not a small number. It's a huge number.
That's so true. We encourage entrepreneurship a little bit different than saying, well, we want everyone to go be an entrepreneur because we realize that that's not realistic. Yep. But we want to build a lot of the things that you've been speaking to, those mindsets. And that's I was just thinking as you were saying, one of the things that teachers is so important for teachers is that encouragement. And as kids, it tends to happen as kids get older and go through their academic careers, the box gets smaller. They hear more no's than yeses. You know, kindergarten is great. You're doing all this stuff. And then, and then as you go up the chain, the standards get tighter. Everything starts closing in until you get to, you know, you get these high school kids that are afraid to say, I have this crazy idea. And because they think someone's going to say, no, well, that's not going to work. Dude, don't bother yourself with that, kid. You know? So it's so true. And having mentors, teachers are your first line of defense there with mentorship, and in as easy as they can encourage a young person, they can discourage them too. We've heard lots of stories about, you know, adults and people we've talked to said, yeah, my principal when I was 15 told me I wasn't going to amount to anything. And I mean, that can set you on a very bad path. So, and I like to talk to, you know, you said mentors can be anybody. And a lot of times we don't think of mentors as being younger. And I have several younger mentors, and I think my kids probably fall into that category as well. Because boy, am I learning some stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think another thing is that, and I hate to sound stereotypical in this, but culturally, and when I say we, I'm talking about Appalachia because that's where you deal and that's where I live. I think culturally in Appalachia, maybe it's a little bit a harder sell. Appalachia has traditionally not had an entrepreneurial culture. I mentioned working for the man. I mean, you know, there were some amazing entrepreneurial opportunities in the coal boom for sure. You know, we see retail people that came out of that as entrepreneurs and stuff. But a lot of that was really based on, I want to get a good job and I want to make a big paycheck and hopefully my son will have that job someday. The entrepreneurial thing was really not part of their choice. And in some cases, that's good. I mean, we need mechanics and coal miners and, you know, don't get me wrong, but the number of coal miners in the world has dropped, you know, 50-fold. So, you know, we got to think out of the box a little bit here. We
are unfortunately coming to a closure for this podcast, but like we said, we love to leave it hanging for our listeners and for us so we can get you back in sometime soon. How can folks find Adventures on the Gorge? We like to put that out for everybody so they know how to reach you for more.
Sure. So Adventures on the Gorge is really simple. Website is onthegorge.com. My email is dave@onthegorge.com. Feel free to reach out if you need to. I try to answer all my emails. Sometimes I'm traveling in places where I have no email. A lot of times if we do a Grand Canyon trip, I'm out for 20 days. So if I don't respond, it's because I am somewhere where I can't respond. But yeah, check us out, onthegorge.com. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and for giving us this beautiful scenery to look at.
Great. Good. Wonderful.
So pretty.
All right. Well, come soon and visit. Next time you're up in Chetty's, just say, hey, by any chance, is Dave Arnold around? Look me up.
Awesome. We absolutely will. Laura and I have been planning some kind of something we have to go do together. Thanks, Dave. We've just had such a great time with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks.